At Truscott Research Laboratories, a medical establishment specialising in the development of new vaccines against virulent diseases, two of the staff, Barbara Anthony and Dr. Philip Carswood, are comparing notes on the latest tests. Their new vaccine is needed urgently. They cannot afford any setbacks to this project. The Deadly Air, written by Lester Powell, produced by Leonard White, and directed by John Knight. Carswood goes to the controls for the laboratory's test room and runs through them with Henniger, the technician. All seems well, and Carswood leaves Henniger in charge of the room and the files of vaccine. However, a figure in a lab coat sneaks up on Henniger, overpowers him, and renders him unconscious with a pad soaked in chloroform. The assailant proceeds to destroy a batch of the vaccine by lowering the pressure in their storage chamber. Steed is called in to investigate, and brings Dr. Keel with him to act as a medical expert. They suit up before entering the main laboratory. Inside, Dr. Hugh Chalk, one of the senior scientists, is discussing setting up a final test with the head of the project, Herbert Truscott. Steed and Keel introduce themselves to everyone, and Steed chats to Barbara, trying to see if she has spotted any suspicious behaviour. Keel is with Henniger and another man, Dr. Owen Craxton, the other senior scientist involved in the vaccine project. Keel agrees with Dr. Chalk that another test must be done, and in another room, Steed rings 110 to discuss progress. 110 seems satisfied but reminds Steed that there is little time to waste. In the centre's canteen, Carol Wilson has brought along some medical books for Keel to refer to. Keel does not relish having to delve into the large tomes. It's too much like being back at medical school. After the tea break, Chalk, Craxton and Carswood prepare some vaccine in a flask. Carswood volunteers to be the test subject, much to the concern of Barbara and Dr. Chalk, but Carswood is determined to go through with the test. Keel helps Carswood go through the procedure until a new file of vaccine is produced. Then Keel is sent out to the canteen with Steed and Barbara to avoid possible contamination. Steed carries on his discussion with Barbara over lunch. She is concerned that any delay to the vaccine development could result in more lives being lost. Steed reassures her that he and Keel will do their best to stop any further delay to the project. But when she has left, Steed admits to Keel that as yet he has no clues to the identity of the troublemaker. Back in the main laboratory, things are going disastrously. Carswood is in the isolation room, struggling for breath. He staggers out and collapses, fighting for his life, just as Keel walks in. Luckily, the centre has a hospital wing, and Carswood is rushed to it. There, he is put in isolation inside an iron lung in order to keep him breathing, whilst the cause of the collapse can be determined. The doctor there, Harvey, thinks Carswood may have received a dose of the disease that the vaccine is to be used against. But how did he get it? Steed and Keel test the vaccine on a guinea pig to see if it is faulty, but the little animal shows no ill effects after being injected, so the vaccine is not the cause of Carswood's collapse. Then Steed enlists the help of the centre's engineer, Armstrong. They investigate the air supply system used by the now decontaminated isolation room and find broken glass near an intake fan. Steed realises that a file has been placed on the fan so that the blades will break it, releasing the contents into the room, but he is still no nearer to knowing the identity of the culprit. Back in the laboratory, Steed agrees with Keel that they will be the volunteers to test out the room. They enter, wearing suits and breathing masks. As they do so, Armstrong tells Barbara of Steed's discovery. The engineer is concerned that there will be more sabotage and returns to the air duct to check. The door to the room is suddenly locked, and the air intake is turned on. It looks like Steed and Keel will be the next to be infected. Fortunately for them, Armstrong discovers the man who is about to attach a file to the fan. Henniger! A struggle ensues and Henniger knifes Armstrong before running off. Fatally wounded, Armstrong manages to move the switch that unlocks the booth door and stops the air intake before falling dead to the floor. Steed and Keel find the dead engineer and realise that he has saved their lives. As they search around, Steed spots an unbroken file taped to the fan blade. He gives it to Keel, who takes it to an old friend, the eccentric Professor Kilbride, who once specialised in the vaccine field. Kilbride is now retired and spends much of his time in meditation, but is happy to help Keel and offers to test the phial. Kilbride discovers that its contents are 100 times the normal strength of the vaccine, hence the effect on Carswood. A little while later in the laboratory, Barbara is working alone on the final batch of vaccine. Suddenly she is set upon by a suited figure and chloroformed. The figure takes the batch away as Barbara lies unconscious on the floor. A few minutes later, Steed and Chalk enter to find her. They revive the female scientist, but find she remembers nothing of the attack. Steed is concerned for Professor Kilbride, as he now has the only clue to the mystery, and gets Keel to return to the Professor's home as fast as possible. However, Keel is too slow. The Professor is not alone. Having telephoned the laboratory and spoken about his results to Henniger, the Professor now has a visit from the younger scientist. Henniger is determined to retrieve the high-strength vaccine and attempts to stab the Professor in doing so. At that moment, Keel bursts through the door and grapples with Henniger, overpowering the technician. Henniger admits to his part in the sabotage, but tells Keel that the man behind it all is in fact Dr. Craxton, who wants to discredit the vaccine in order to stop its production. Craxton's plan is to leave after the project has been ruined, then set up elsewhere and produce the vaccine by himself, reaping the large financial rewards. Meanwhile, Steed is still at the laboratory with Craxton, unaware of the other man's plans. Craxton tricks Steed into going in the isolation room, locking the door and setting the fan working with a new file taped to it. Keel returns and finds Dr. Chalk and explains to him what has happened. They spot Steed locked in the room and try to get him out, but Steed is convinced he is infected and refuses to leave the room. Chalk tells Steed that this isn't possible. The last phials of vaccine are in fact water, including the one Craxton used on the fan intake. Truscott, the head of the centre, has had the last 6 lethal phials removed and replaced without Craxton's knowledge. A relieved Steed leaves the isolation room as Craxton is taken away by security.